Hello folks, today's video is going to be a little different from my normal ones. In addition to the new topic, I'm also trying out this narrator setup. Let me know what you think. First off, let me introduce myself if you aren't familiar with the channel. My name is Chris, I am a father and a husband, and this channel is centered around motorcycles, but we talk about various different topics as well. I currently ride a 2019 Harley-Davidson Fat Bob 107. I've been riding for around 6.5 years with a small break for right around a year in the middle. I have ridden sport bikes and cruisers alike. Before you continue watching this video, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe and hit the notification bell if my channel sounds like something you'd be into. Now, on to the main course. The reason all you fine individuals clicked on this video: how to ride a motorcycle. The video is going to be broken down into 4 main topics. First, startup and hand controls. Second, clutch and shifting. Third, braking. And finally, number 4, turning and controlling the bike. This is not going to be an in-depth video as far as clutch operations. This video is meant to be a basic how-to for new riders who either just bought a bike and don't know where to start, or someone who's on the fence of riding altogether. Alrighty, let's start off with the first topic: startup and hand controls. All bikes are set up differently, and I'll try to mention the differences if I'm aware of and remember them as I continue. For this video, we're going to be using my Harley-Davidson. From left to right, we have a stationary grip, clutch lever, which we'll explain later, screen display toggle, horn, headlight controls, left turn signal, hazard lights, engine start switch, bike on and off switch, right turn signal, throttle, and front brake lever. Unlike a car, motorcycles have 2 separate braking controls, each one solely devoted to the front or rear wheel. But we will touch on that more in the braking section of the video. The clutch lever will also be explained further at a later point. The screen display toggle is fairly self-explanatory. It toggles the screen. Each bike is different, and in addition to your odometer and trip A or B, the screen will show gas mileage, fuel level, RPMs, current gear, a clock, and whatever else your bike may have. It is important to note this is much different from a more technical bike such as an adventure bike. Bikes with more electronic inputs and digitally customizable features will have many more options in their front screen, most times requiring a directional pad and selection switch. I trust I do not need to explain the horn button, so let's move on to the headlight control. On almost all bikes, your headlight as well as supplementary running lights will be on as long as your bike is on. This switch allows you to put the brights at either solid on or a quick flash to give others the go-ahead at 4-way stops, etc. The left turn signal is, again, a fairly self-explanatory button, but it is worth mentioning the differences in past bikes I've ridden. Many metric bikes, any Suzukis, Kawasaki's, etc., have both turn signals on one location. It is a sliding button where you slide to the left for left signaling and to the right for right. To deactivate, you would click it in the center. On this Harley, each hand has its own turn signal button. Most newer bikes have self-canceling turn signals. What does that mean? Well, I'm glad you asked. Well, once you push the signal button, the bike will do one of 2 things. It will either sense a certain lean angle and deactivate the signal after a turn is completed, or it will start a countdown of around 10 to 15 seconds. At the end of the countdown, the signal will turn off, ensuring you don't confuse cargoers all around you and create a dangerous situation for yourself. To cancel the signals on this bike manually, you just press the button again and click it off. Hazard lights are universal to cars, and I have great faith you already know how to use these, and you do not turn them on just because it starts raining. Here's where things may get a little confusing: the engine start switch and the on-off switch. I think it would be an easier transition if I explained older Harley designs as well as most metric bikes first. On these bikes, they have a key system, just like in many cars. You turn the key to turn the bike on. The main difference is in a car, the key starts the engine, whereas in a bike, you have a button for the electric starter. The newer system Harleys went to, as well as some other companies, is a keyless start. Much like new cars, no key is physically required for ignition, but a key fob is. The bike senses when the fob is within range, and this button turns the electrical components on and readies the bike for engine ignition. After that, all you have to do is hold this engine start button until the motor runs, just like a keyed car, and then let go. As you may guess, to shut the bike off, you press the other side of the switch to kill the engine. The key on these types of motorcycles is only used for the fork lock. The fork lock is sort of an anti-theft device that locks the handlebars completely to the left when engaged. Then you have the right turn signal, the throttle, and the brake. The throttle controls how high the engine revs and is spring-loaded, if your bike is properly maintained. There are different kinds of operating systems for throttles, but for this video, all you need to know is how to use it and what it does. Turning the grip towards you and against the spring tension accelerates the engine, while turning it away, letting it spring back, decelerates the engine. This brake lever is for the front brake only, and we will explore that more in a few minutes. So now that you know what all the controls on the handlebars do, why don't we talk about the clutch and how to shift? If you've driven a manual car before, this part will come very easy to you. If not, this might be the hardest part for you to grasp. In my opinion, learning manual shifting on a motorcycle is harder than a car for people who have never done it before because you have so much else to worry about. I'm going to try to break this down as easy as possible. The engine is sending power to a shaft every second it is running. To be able to slow down, stop, or change gears, you have to be able to disconnect this power from the rest of the drivetrain. This is where the clutch comes in. In simple terms, the clutch is basically an enclosed basket with different components in it. When you pull the clutch lever, the basket sort of opens and disconnects the drivetrain from the engine. An easy way to think about this is to imagine one hand being the engine and the other hand the clutch. If you put your hands together, they move together when you try to turn one. When you separate one from the other, your hands move independently and do not affect each other. This is how the clutch works. When the clutch is pulled in, the engine is disconnected from the transmission and there is no power sent to the rear wheel. When you release the clutch lever, the plate presses against each other and translates engine power to rear wheel spin. Now I know this is a lot to throw at you if it's all new, but I have one more thing to add. I know, I'm sorry, but this is important. It's gears. On most newer bikes, you'll have 6 gears. Older ones commonly have 4 or 5. The Shift series is pretty easy in my opinion, and I went ahead and made this high-tech display for your viewing pleasure. On a bike, your left foot controls what gear you are in. The linkage clicks up or down and returns to its neutral position in the middle each time. The farthest gear down is first. You'll know you've hit this gear if your display says first or you can't click any more down. To go up a gear, you just click it up. See? Pretty easy. Up is up and down is down. But there's a catch. Neutral sits right between first and second. It's not a full click up or down like the regular gears, and it does take some getting used to. On almost all bikes, there is a lit N on the display indicating you are in neutral. When you are in neutral, the bike moves much easier whether the clutch is in or out. And if the engine is running, this is the only time you can release the clutch lever when the bike is not moving. To get out of neutral, you just click the lever up or down with your foot. Now let's mesh the clutch and gears together, quite literally. Assuming you are starting in neutral and the bike is running, you'll grab the clutch lever, pull it all the way in, disengaging the engine, then click into whatever gear you want. To start moving the bike, gently roll on the throttle and slowly let out the clutch lever until fully released. There is a friction zone you will feel when you start to let the clutch lever out. An easy way to find and practice with this friction zone is to not apply any throttle in a closed parking lot or safe area as you let out the clutch lever. You will feel the bike start to move and the engine bog down at a certain point. This is where your clutch starts to grab onto your engine. Being comfortable with this friction zone is what leads to smooth and quick shifts. To continue gathering speed, you'll need to shift up a gear when the engine's RPMs get too high. To do this, do the same procedure as before. The better you get at matching your clutch and throttle operation, the quicker and smoother your gear changes will be. To shift down gears while decelerating or coming to a stop, it's the same process, just down a gear instead of up. When downshifting, there is a technique called rev matching that should be used. Using rev matching will make downshifts smooth and take some stress off of your brakes. To rev match, you accelerate the throttle to try and predictively match your RPM level to the new gear and speed before letting go of the clutch lever. There is a phrase called blipping the throttle that refers to this. Think of the throttle input as a quick flick of the wrist before letting the clutch lever out. If you do not rev match when decelerating and or coming to a stop as you shift down gears, your bike will be very jerky and you'll put more stress on your clutch and drivetrain. Now, because this is a very basic beginner's video, I'm not going too in-depth with rev matching. I do plan on making a video on this very soon, and if you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, you'll be sure to see it as soon as it comes out. The next segment, we will be talking about braking. Like I touched on before, braking on a bike is very different than a car. To begin, instead of one brake pedal for 4 wheels, you have one brake lever for the front wheel and one brake pedal for the rear wheel. Some bikes with anti-lock braking systems, or ABS, are set up to apply perfect braking pressure to both brakes when just using the front lever. Many bikes with ABS are not set up like this, and as a good rule of thumb, you should always treat both brakes as if they were separate and not connected. On a motorcycle, it is wise to use about 60-40 brake ratio. This means 60% front brakes and 40% rear brakes. I've personally heard 50-50 and 70-30 before as well. I think 60-40 is the happy medium and makes you consciously think about the rear tire. Most of your weight and movement is going to be absorbed by the front brakes on a motorcycle and car alike. On a motorcycle, it is critical you are very in tune with your brakes since you don't have the luxury of locking up any wheels like in a car. On a bike, if your front wheel locks up, even for a second, you are most likely going down. You should grab the front brake lever and the rear brake pedal at the same time and apply a gradual even pressure to both evenly. But Chris, what about the 60-40 ratio you just told us? Well, I'm glad you asked. The rear wheel becomes very light when braking, especially if it's done quick. If you do not have any ABS and you apply full brake capability to the front and rear, the rear wheel will lock up and skid. This is where you have to get to know your bike and get a feel for the brakes. Maybe do some low-speed parking lot practice just trying to lock up the rear brake to see what it feels like and see where that braking point is and how the feedback in the brake pedal feels. Every bike is different and you really have to get used to your own bike's personality to make full use of your braking power. So let's backtrack a little and replace that 60-40 with the 50-50 for beginners, and as you learn to ride and explore your bike's capabilities, that'll morph into a 60-40. And you should never apply brakes while turning on a motorcycle, unless you are trail braking. I'll make a separate video on this topic as well due to its complexity, but if you don't already know what it is, just don't do it. Okay, so now you have a comprehensive understanding of how to start your bike, how to ride in a straight line. But what about turning? Well, the good news is, not only is this the last segment, but it's also pretty easy. If you've ever ridden a bicycle, you already know how to turn and maneuver a motorcycle. Granted, the feel and weight is much different, but the core controls are the same. Countersteering is something many people are afraid to learn about or even talk about because it doesn't really make much sense to the average Joe. But it's something you've been doing since you were a kid without even realizing it. Countersteering means to turn one way, you steer the handlebars in the opposite direction. I know this sounds very complicated and confusing if you've never ridden before, but it's truly not. When you begin a lean to take a corner on a bike, the wheel naturally begins to point in the opposite direction. For the most part, the only time you need to consciously choose to turn the bars in the opposite direction you wish to go is during emergency situations. For example, let's say you're cruising along at a brisk 52.6 miles per hour, and all of a sudden some large debris is dropped into the street from a work truck from Anderson's Salivating Sandwiches, or ASS for short. Between speed and traffic, you can't slow down, so you'll need to swerve to avoid a crash. You'll need to push the bar in the opposite direction to initiate a lean and veer off to one side or the other, and then push again to return to the area you were traveling in and not ride off the side of a hill, tumbling into the nearest farm, becoming 3 baby chickens' new papa. This skill is important to have, and it needs to be practiced enough that it becomes muscle memory. In the second or two you have to avoid a road hazard, you don't have time to think about pushing left to go right, or whatever that thing that handsome man Chris was talking about on that video you watched last month when you were eating hot Cheetos and drinking Mountain Dew Code Red, waiting for your roommate to get home from dance class so you can go meet your ex-girlfriend at the Waffle House down the road and talk about how you could make it work while you split some smothered hash browns. The last thing I will mention in this category is the overall control of the motorcycle. Bikes are much less forgiving than cars. Couple that with the fact that this may be your maiden voyage, you're going to want to be extra careful. Make all of your riding inputs very smooth and treat your new two-wheeled friend like a little hamster. Be very gentle with it. Appreciate its looks and have a healthy respect for it, understanding that at any time you anger it, there will be blood. Alright guys and gals, we've had fun and all the segments are done, but I have one last surprise for you. Call it a bonus if you wish. What I'm about to tell you is very important, and I'm going to get serious here for a moment. No more jokes. The biker wave, the most coveted of all waves. A wave shared between two individuals never having met, but tightly bonded by the love for their two-wheeled steel stallions. I know what you must be thinking. It's just a wave, right? There's where you're wrong, buddy. To complete a successful biker wave, it has to start from the soul. It's an uncontrollable movement that starts deep within your very being as soon as you see that single headlight driving towards you. You start to stress about when the perfect time to wave is. What if you wave and he doesn't wave back? What if he already waved and you didn't see it? You raise your hand just slightly from your side and form a half-assed peace sign pointing diagonally down and away from you. Did he see it? At last, you see his hand leave the bar and drop to his side. Two gloved fingers separate from the rest, and there it is. The most beautiful position you've ever seen a man's hand in before. The biker wave. Now that you have all the knowledge I have bestowed upon you in this video, please go forth and ride. Do not forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. If you like this video, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. Till next time, ride safe, have fun. Dad out.